Good evening, everyone. Wherever you are, it is exciting to be able to say now that our audience has expanded beyond Northern Arizona, beyond our Valley family and friends. We now have viewers in Mexico, in the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the East Coast, the Midwest. So we welcome everyone, and to you we say thank you for being here. Um, we're going to jump right in. Sister Kara, will you go ahead and get us started?
Absolutely. And just to echo Ms. Bernadine, thank you to all who are joining us this evening for this community dialogue. We're excited to speak to you this evening about the topic of Black spirituality, organizing by faith. And to launch us into this conversation, we are going to watch a brief video about the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church.
Thank you.
It was the oldest black church in Birmingham, and it was fairly large. And so they sensitive meetings would happen there, which would also make it a target. On Sunday morning, September 15th, it was Youth Day. Right after Sunday school, Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robinson, Denise McNair, and Cynthia Wesley are getting ready to go into the choir.
I remember Addie, I was closest to Addie. We would go to church picnics. Addie and I just gravitated to each other.
Cynthia Wesley was a friend of mine. She was at my school. She was a ninth grader. Just started in September. And I was an 11th grader.
I remember Denise back there always smiling, and she was the only child. And I remember Carol Robinson being quiet. She played in the orchestra at her school.
Addie Mae's sister Sarah is also in the ladies' lounge. Sarah said the last thing that she remembers is seeing them helping each other tie on sashes, and then it went dark. We talked about an explosion that reverberates through the entire city of Birmingham. Everybody heard it.
I was at South Illerton Baptist Church, and our pastor was shifting kind of nervously across the room and said he had received word that 16th Street Baptist Church had been bombed.
I was in Sunday school class. The building seemed like it was shaking off its foundation. Fumes, smelling fumes, and getting hit in the head. I couldn't find my younger sister. Only later to find out that she was taken to the hospital. She was only 4. She was cut in the head, blood dripping down her clothes and down her face.
Reverend John Cross comes down after the explosion to go into the hole and hears moaning.
My father heard somebody saying, Addie, Addie, and he realized that Sarah was calling her sister's name because that's the last voice that she heard before the explosion occurred.
They find the bodies and they're almost literally stacked on top of each other.
He said it was like they had been blown together.
It devastated me. It was just so painful to know that these girls were killed at church. They had not done anything to deserve something like that.
That was enough to pull people off the bench. Kids are supposed to be safe in church. It's not supposed to happen in America. We're above this kind of thing. And so this was the catalyst to get some things moving.
It was pretty heavy.
Yes.
But nevertheless, what is it? For almost 60 years, or maybe right at 60 years, here we are 60 years later. And so we will be joined momentarily by a good old Southern Baptist preacher who happens to be a dear friend and brother. And if he were here now, and I'll bring it up again, where we say in the Baptist church down in the South, we've come this far by faith. Uh, so I think one of the beautiful things about our Blackness, our culture, is that we find so many ways to worship the Most High. And we express our faith, our love, our dependence on a higher power in so many different ways. Um, and so we begin tonight's discussion uh, as the foundation with um, the bombing of this Birmingham church back in '63. So, Sister Kara, if you would go ahead and take us into our discussion.
Yes, so we're going to hear a presentation on reflections on the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and that presentation will be given by Dr. Greg McAllister. Dr. McAllister is a lecturer with a master's degree in history and a graduate certificate in ethnic studies from NAU. His research focuses on the history of African Americans in the Southwest, the formation of race in the United States, and African interaction with indigenous peoples and Latinos in North America. Dr. McAllister brings a varied background as an historian, percussionist, and artist. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm getting all these titles conferred on me. So I don't have a doctorate, but if you're comfortable calling me doctor, that's fine. Neither have I been initiated as a Babalao, but I think when I grew my beard over the summer, I was given that name.
Yeah.
So I've had 2 days of prep for this, and these are opportunities, right? That are given. For me, it was a spontaneous task, but so hopefully that I'm stepping up to this task of talking about this tragedy, and I've been grappling with it for 2 days, and it's not necessarily something that I like to dwell on. The killing of innocent children. I mean, in many ways, this is even more devastating than the police violence, right? That happens to each of us every day, right? That can potentially happen. But just the killing of Black children, is something that happens. Black and brown children are dying every minute as we speak. So this is something that persists. Even those of us who are in the belly of the American empire, these things are happening in Africa. These things are happening in Latin America. I mean, children are starving to death, and that's part of this system of oppression that we all experience at different levels. Okay, now to link this with our spiritual traditions, I think it's important for us to embrace contradictions, tragedies within the context of faith. Okay, it's important to realize that these things aren't necessarily logical. There's not necessarily a logical analysis for this, of these tragedies. So I think it's important for us to look at the tragedy of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Now, there's a book. It's called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And this is the author of this book is James Cone. And so he's able to make a connection between the tragedy of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and the tragedy of the lynching of Black people in our history. And one of the common themes that persist in both stories is that you have an innocent victim. Okay. So I'd like to start out with the introduction here. I'm not going to read the whole book, but I think it's important to draw on this. So the cross and the lynching tree are separated by nearly 2,000 years. One is the universal symbol of Christian faith, and the other is the quintessential symbol of Black oppression in America. Though both symbols of death, though both are symbols of death, one represents a message of hope and salvation, while the other signifies the negation and message of white supremacy. Despite the obvious similarities between Jesus' death on the cross and the death of thousands of Black men, women strung up to die on lampposts or tree, relatively few people, apart from Black poets, novelists, and others, reality-seeing artists, have explored the symbolic connections. What is at stake is the credibility and promise of the Christian gospel and the hope that we may heal the wounds of racial violence that continues to divide our churches and our society. Now, this book does actually talk about the bombing of this church. So I'm just not, there's a context here. There's actually two references to this event in this book. One is the response by Niebuhr, who was a theologian, with James Baldwin. They had a conversation about this tragedy in New York. They came together and had a panel. And they started out the conversation by talking about the image. There was a destruction of the image of Christ. And apparently it was a white Jesus. So I thought that was interesting. But that image was destroyed in the bombing. And Baldwin, in a sense, said that we've been oppressed by this white Jesus. And ironically, when the church was rebuilt, there was a gift from a community in Wales of a Black Jesus. So now they have a Black Jesus in that church. So why is this important? A lot of it has to do with this idea that if Jesus was an innocent victim of oppression, and that Jesus is representing God, then that means God is with the oppressed. Even as tragic as that is, that means God is with the oppressed. This is one of the central themes throughout this book. Okay, so I want to move on to how this relates to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King's perspective on the cross was not derived from reading theological texts in graduate school. His view of the cross was shaped by the reading of the Bible through the Black religious experience and through his personal suffering, very important point, through his personal suffering in his fight for justice. So here's a quote: "My personal trials have taught me the value of unmerited suffering. This is a very important point here. Unmerited suffering. This bombing is all about unmerited suffering, right? Those children there was no reason for them to die, right? They did not commit any crimes, right? Okay. Martin Luther King's perspective on the cross was derived from reading. Okay, let me go on. My personal trials have taught me the value of unmerited suffering. Suffering could create bitterness and hate, or one can seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. Seek to transform that suffering to a creative force. When King thought about Jesus hanging on the shameful cross, he also saw God transform a tragic situation into something redemptive. And it goes on. King saw in Jesus' unremitted suffering on the cross as God's answer to Black suffering on the lynching tree. Even in the face of the killing of 4 little girls in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, September 15th, 1963, King did not lose his faith that love is redemptive, even for the whites who committed this unspeakable crime. In his eulogy for their martyred children, King said that they did not die in vain. God still has a way of wringing good from evil. History has proven over and over that unmerited suffering is redemptive. Now, I struggle with this, okay? He contended that innocent blood could serve as a redemptive force to transform our whole Southland from the low road of man's inhumanity to the high road of peace and brotherhood. So, one of the ways that we can think about this, and in a sense, this is a strategy, a personal strategy, to think about that, for a quote unquote Christian nation, right, to have this tradition of the killing of Black bodies, but not only Black people, indigenous people as well, right? That there's this tradition of a Christian country tormenting the oppressed. So how can we transform this tradition into, of lynching, of state violence, as well as militia violence, of people that profess to follow Jesus? How can we transform that image of the Christ from being a white Zeus-looking person to a Black body? This is a possible solution. Then maybe all Christian churches should have a Black Jesus in there, or even an indigenous-looking Jesus, so that as people interact with the image of God, right? We're all made in God's image, that, this is a possible solution to mentally think about people of color as being in the image of God. Now, I'm not saying that you have to worship us, but what I'm suggesting, though, is that instead of seeing images of criminality, right, that is associated with us, to divinity, which we all are, right? We all have the divine. And to remember, again, Jesus was criminalized, right? And so again, this is a very important book. If you get a chance to read this, I highly recommend it. Again, this is Cross and the Lynching Tree. Well, to sum this up, how do we look at these tragedies? How can we use these tragedies to transform society? I guess I would leave it with that question.
It's a good question, and we look forward to engaging with it during our open question and answer. So thank you very much for that presentation. Now we are going to hear a presentation on the Black churches, gospel music, and community organizing by Reverend Clarence Teddy Williams. Reverend Williams is the senior pastor of the Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. A native of Savannah, Reverend Williams received a Bachelor of Science degree from Savannah State College, now known as Savannah State University. His religious education includes studies at Beeson Divinity School, the Billy Graham School of Evangelism, and an honorary doctorate of Christian music for his work in church music. Welcome, Reverend Williams.
Reverend Williams, you're on mute. Reverend Williams, please unmute your mic.
Now that's better. That's more like it.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you.
Great. I'm from Savannah. I'm from the deep South, and I went to all Southern schools, so it takes me a little while longer. And if Miss Lewis is laughing, she went to Southern school to deep South. It's good to be with you all, and it was. I tell you, I was honored to meet the mayor earlier when I came on, and was honored to be in her presence. Let me share with you. Let me get this PowerPoint up, and we're going to get started. I think we are. And I practiced this thing.
You just took it down, Reverend Williams. If you would share.
This is the platform. I got it. I'm going to get it now. Here it comes. All right. Bam. 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 All righty.
There you are.
Here we go. Good. Let me start with this again. I'm going to try to move through it because I understand that there's going to be a question and answer period after everything tonight. And so you can hold your questions, and then I'm going to try to answer them. But let me go through this. And my presentation tonight is The Black Church, Our Story and Our Song. And I've already been introduced, so I don't need to go. I can skip a few slides. In 2015, I had a role in a film that they did in Savannah, Georgia, 40 Acres and a Mule. And it was eye-opening for me in that the role that I played, the lines, I was learning my lines, and I had a new appreciation for preachers during this critical time, which was right after coming out of slavery. I had a new appreciation for Black preachers and the role of the Black church from this experience, because as we sat there, because the Emancipation Proclamation was read at Second African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. And so when they decided to do this documentary, and we had to study our character, I was Reverend Houston or Houston in this documentary, but it changed my whole concept about the Black church, our involvement in social civic affairs and so forth. And so I want to share it from this perspective. And I want to drop this on you from the first slide. That picture in the background was First Bryan Baptist Church here in Savannah, the mother church of Black Baptists in North America. Now, I know some folk, you're going to hear First African, you may hear First Bryan, but there's always been a little struggle there. But First African has the name, but First Brian is still on the original property. So you can weigh that any way you want to weigh. But we can't allow our story to be told, become his story. We can't allow our story to become his story. And you know what I'm saying when I said his story. And here's some must reads, and I'm Brother McAllister. It's good to see folk reading about us, and so we can better appreciate ourselves. And here's some must reads: the Bible, the Constitution of the United States of America, the Willie Lynch letter, and the Emancipation Proclamation. And we're in this era of Google, so as you Google, if you have time, Google 50 books that every African American should read and see what comes up there, and start reading about us so you can understand us. And I love the Willie Lynch letter when it comes to how we're still acting in the same form. So I hope it changes in my lifetime. The role of the Black church has always been critical to the advancement and viability of the Black community. And that's why the Black church is different. That's why we are different. Our role is different because of our heritage. Our role is different. Now here's one that I was thinking about it. So this has to be God ordained because I listened to our previous presenter. But this is from Luke chapter 4, verse 18 and 19. I want you to hear this, Brother McAllister. The Spirit of the Lord is on me. This is paraphrase. Because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. And you will hear Jesus said this also. Jesus said this. It was stated already in the Old Testament. Here it is again in Luke's gospel. Now, here's where I want to kind of dive into it. The Black church has historically played a major role in the liberation of Black people. Hold on to that word liberation in light of the scripture I just read. The civil rights movement, which did much to secure the liberation of Black Americans, was primarily a movement of Black Christian leaders. So Black preachers are Black laymen too. It's according to what denomination you're in. If you're in the Baptist church, you would have laymen. Laymen would be the deacons or the laity of the church, the AME, the steward and stewardess, and all of these folk. But the Black church leadership, the civil rights movement, was a powerful movement in liberating us as a race because of the involvement of Christian leaders, those who would pray. I saw a documentary once, and this is from the civil rights movement with Dr. King and those, and Fred Shuttlesworth had to pray, and they were throwing bottles at him, but they kept praying, they kept praying, they kept praying. But through it all, Christian leaders were at the forefront. And I venture to say today, even now, if we're going to be successful, I was on a Zoom earlier with some folk because we're here in Georgia trying to get one of our own elected to the Senate, and we were on a Zoom talking about some strategies as to how we get the folk out. And there was a state legislator who was a brother. He got on and just went into the talking. Now he got on the Zoom and he was the facilitator, but he started facilitating without offering prayer. Spirituality, and I'm going to bring that up. It's going to come up a little later, but the movement, the civil rights movement, everybody on this Zoom can identify more with the civil rights movement. It was Christian leaders that made it so powerful. The Black preacher from the days of slavery always played a vital role in their communities. Great leaders, and you see all the names, all of these folks. Some of them were not preachers. All of them, not all of them were preachers, but many of them were. And here's a statement, according to Howard Thurman. He said, the antebellum Negro preacher, I like this, was the greatest single factor in determining the spiritual destiny of the slave community. The Black preacher inspired the enslaved community to hope in a future that was different than their present circumstances. And you remember this same Jesse Jackson, Keep Hope Alive? It was the Black preacher, it was the Black church that fostered this, and it kept us moving. And though the Black preacher was limited in power, mobility, ability, and opportunities, he had one great thing in his favor. He believed that God was father of every human being. And when the preacher delivered his message to the enslaved people, he knew them intimately. Now, that's a problem we're having now. I'm going to try to bring both of them together historically and contemporarily. Now, notice this. Now, we were effective as a race of people because the Black preacher delivered his message to enslaved people that he knew intimately. Well, we're in this era now of mega churches and they're pastoring in cell blocks. I went to Antioch Baptist in Atlanta, I think it was 2000, 2001, to preach at the church, and this particular Sunday was Family and Friends Day, and when we got to the door, I said, well, Brother Pastor, I usually shake folks' hands when they're leaving the church, and he said, well, I don't. I said, well, can I go? He said, well, I guess I'll go with you. And a young man, I'm talking about knowing the folk intimately, young man got to the door where we were, and that was the first time he shook his pastor's hand in 4 years. 4 years. We've got to know, if we're going to be powerful, as the Black preachers were then, we've got to know our people intimately. He knew what was going on in their lives. He knew how hard it was to be in their position because he was in it too. And so when you get that, it brings us together. There's something about knowing what we have in common that will help us. And he would encourage them. He would say things like, you're not slaves, you're not niggers, you're God's children. And he raised their expectation. There was the Black preacher in the Black church. And so here's a part, what we don't teach, the association that I was moderator of for 8 years, I incorporated this into Christian education, into our Christian education department, and I encourage churches to do it in their Christian education. There needs to be, in some form, terms like social justice and liberation theology should be taught in Christian education in our Black churches. They're not going to get it in school. Mr. Wesley Law and Miss Lewis probably remember, her father worked with Wesley Law, who was the president of the local NAACP here in Savannah, and at one time served as state president in the state of Georgia, but he was living right here in Savannah. And Mr. Law told us once in one of our youth council meetings that God, and I'm quoting him, he said, God, the church, and the NAACP is all we got. It's all we got. Now, I don't know what's happening out there in Arizona or wherever you live, but here in Savannah, some folk think they have arrived because they can go into a certain hotel and other places. We have not arrived yet. And at some point, as a race of people, that's why it's good to read and know your history. Read important documents. Know from whence we've come. Mr. Law said all we have is God, the church, and the NAACP. Now, here's what we can identify with. When you talk about the church's involvement, we've moved to a social civic platform. You hear people now talking about the church's involvement. there was in the early 80s. Now, here's how you can get trapped. The government tried to trap the black church by encouraging them, and this came through our national convention once. Dr. Theodore Jemison was the president then. He warned the preachers. He said, be careful about these 501c3. It's their way of muzzling you. And that's the dilemma we have right now. The modern civil rights movement brought with it organization. Now, underscore organization. And I list some of the groups, the NAACP, CORE, and SCLC, and all of those folks. And what happens here, we were doing things, but we were not organized. We were somewhat fragmented. But we found out in that modern civil rights movement that if we corral ourselves, if we bring ourselves together, we can do more together. Organization is important. Now, organizing, apart from the Zoom I was on here, Instagram, not too long ago, preachers talking about coming together, and one preacher want to talk about where we're going to get the money to do it, because they know it's money. Whoever spend the money can buy you. Thought I'd tell you that. In organizing, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And so the government said, well, if you get your 501c3, you can apply for this grant and that grant, but you're bound by those rules associated with it. So you can't never really step out the box. And so they have so many ways. Folk know the power of the black church. I'm trying to think of the name of the book, and I meant to have it. I apologize. It's in the library here in Savannah, but I think the name of it, you probably can get it. But the author of the book talked about the black preacher in the black church, and he talked about in Savannah. And he said, in Savannah, he said it's the same black churches, just different players, talking about the preachers. And so the influence of the black pulpit on our people, it's something else. You either can use it for the right things or you can use it for the wrong thing. I know a lot of times folk don't like it, but one thing we learned from the modern civil rights movement, it brought with it organization, or the need for us to organize our efforts. I'm just using life stories here. In Savannah in the past 10 years, we formed, now you got to understand, Savannah was 57, 58% black since the 60s, but we just got a black mayor in the 80s, late 80s. But when we organized, we were able to do things. And so here's what's happening. When we organize, that's an important factor. That's one thing that the modern civil rights movement taught us. And here's some milestones. I'm just going through. There are some milestones there. You can see them. 1947, 54, the Supreme Court, Brown versus Brown. 55, 56, the Montgomery boycott, the boycott. And then when Eisenhower uses the National Guard to enforce desegregation of schools in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm moving closer to some songs and what music does and what it has been. Even if you trace music biblically, it's a powerful tool. Music will soften the hearts of folk. And it does that for us. It speaks to us. It encourages us. I want you to listen to this. I've been talking all day, so if my voice sounds ragged, that's why. Long before Dottie Peoples did this. As I let my mind roll back, I can see the little old church sitting by the railroad track. Just a shabby old place where we used to sing Amazing Grace. We need to go back. We need to go back to the old time way. Someone would set up a tent out in an open field. That was our grandmamas and great grandmamas. Folk would come from miles around, climbing over rocks and hills. No mega church. Very little money got raised. But guess what? A whole lot of souls were saved. We need to go back. Need to go back to the old time way. Here's an old song. I love Jesus. I love Jesus. I love Jesus. Yes, I do. And it goes on to talk about take me to the water and so forth and so on. The point I'm making, music did something and it helped us to thrive. One of the, and I think it's been deemed the most popular song even during the civil rights movement. And I'm going to tie in other songs with slavery on this next slide, but I want to go back to that one. We shall overcome someday. We shall overcome. There was encouragement in the song. Now, Dr. Wendell Whalum, and if you had anybody went to Morehouse through the 80s, I think Dr. Whalum died in the late 80s, they came across him. And he did this diagram about our music, Black sacred music. And he talks about slave utterances and moans and chants and cries. That's why nobody can't make runs like us. It's in us. We can moan a song and make you cry because it's in us. And these Black sacred songs, if we harness it right, it celebrates our God, his goodness, his promise, our faith and hope, our journey toward the promised land. We shall overcome someday. We're still in the process of overcoming. Our first Black mayor here in Savannah, Floyd Adams, when he got elected, everybody went head over heels about it. But the second mayor that we had, Dr. Otis Johnson, when he took his oath to office, he said, he said, we almost lost it by getting happy about being the first, and we rest on being first like we had arrived. It's a journey toward the promised land. And music has its role. There were chants of deliverance that the slave would sing. Then the spiritual, I think I'm coming around to what you all probably would know, can identify with spirituals. Then there was the Black use of Dr. Watt's style hymn, and we call them raised hymns. Like What a Friend We Have in Jesus could be a raised hymn. The Day is Past and Gone, raised hymn. Did Christ old sinner weep? I love the Lord, he heard my cry and pitied my every groan. Those type songs. Then there were concertized spirituals, and you would hear groups like the Fifth Jubilee Singers and others singing those concertized spirituals. And then there were hymns of improvisation. I had one, and I thought I had it on the next slide, on this slide, but I didn't. Then there were the age of the gospel, And then there was contemporary gospel and freedom songs. Now, now, Dr. Whalen did this diagram in the 80s, and I don't know where he would trace it now, because the music we sing now, some of it are not, the songs are not even appropriate for worship. And I don't even get mad at the choir. I get mad at the music leader and whoever hired him or her with their limited knowledge of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for the worship. A lot of our songs that we sing now, there are some good songs now, but it's just that we don't, it seems like our churches, when it comes to worship, we don't listen. So folk are not pricked. The music does not soften the hearts of folks so that they can receive the word. Now, why is it so important that folk hearts are pricked to receive the word? Because when the black preacher gets up, he's just not talking about how she is not just talking about how Moses crossed the Red Sea. In Moses' day, we're talking about the Red Seas we have to cross now. So the message has to have a flavor of liberation in it, because we have not overcome yet. We are overcoming. And so music has its place in our worship. And this is one I did. It's coming out in my book. I'm not pushing anything from my book, but it's going to be a good book. I'm going to talk about all these folk in Savannah and in Georgia. But the title of my book is Born in the Middle, because I'm a product of the 50s, late 50s, 1958. So all of these influences, I was born right in the middle of the 20th century. Can you imagine that? So I had all of my grandmama's stuff in me, my mama's stuff in me, my granddaddy's stuff in me, my dad's stuff, had all this embedded in me. And I had a taste of all of it then to bridge over into the 21st century. With all of it, I'm talking about social civic involvement. The church, I got labeled last year in March here as a racist preacher because I had a meeting at a church with just our people. They said I was racist because I wouldn't let the white press in. But the church is over here. We don't have the country clubs and all of these stuff that they go to and make plans about us. You got to understand. And we're all planning. We planned for 5 years and they planned for 30 years. All of this, the church was the hub for black folk. And music had its role. Dr. King always wanted at his mass rallies, he always wanted Mahalia Jackson or somebody to come and sing a stirring song before. It softens the heart and get the folk prepared to receive. And so that's where we are. We are in an era now where it seems very few church leaders want to speak up and want to speak out. But the text said the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. Now, if the Spirit of the Lord God is upon us, there's some things we ought to be doing. But that word oppress in the King James Version, it's important. Brother McAllister, being oppressed goes with the territory. Suffering goes with the territory. The Bible teaches us that after we've suffered a little while, then God comes along and establishes us, picks us up, I'm paraphrasing, picks us up and dusts us off and give us a new start. If you're a Christian, suffering is a part of this Christian walk. If you're going to identify with Jesus, you got to identify with him in his sufferings. I'm talking to Christians now. And I found out this through our ecumenical coalition here in Savannah. We got the Nation of Islam, we got them all. And this interfaith coalition. And guess what we found out? In our struggles, we found out that there are minor doctrinal interpretation that fragments us. We start talking to some folk. We had Jews and all in our coalition, and we found out minor doctrinal interpretation. But when we can pull it together, get these coalitions together, poor folk disenfranchised, the oppressed. We start speaking up for the least of these. The church did it. The black church did it. Preachers were lynched for speaking up and speaking out. Read about them. So the struggle is real. I'm closing. That's the way the black preacher, the black Baptist preacher, I'm closing. I may have 3 more closing, but I'm closing. The struggle is real. Don't let anybody tell you it ain't real out there. It's real. This last president and this last presidency showed us that the struggle is real. Stuff that was suppressed, were covert, became overt. The struggle is real. The struggle continues today, right still in Savannah, wherever you are. The struggle continues today. We are overcoming. We shall overcome someday. So we're still in the process. And you got to understand, we got to trust God even in the process. Things have gotten better, but in the process, we're still in the process. You got to trust God. And don't quit in the process. The black pulpit, the black preacher, the black pulpit of the black church would encourage you. Don't quit in the process. Discouragement is in the process. All kind of stuff to discourage you or discourage us is in the process. But for God's sake, don't quit in the process because we are overcoming. And I'm fighting. This is my personal testimony. I'm fighting because I can see us in the future. I don't like to say it like Dr. King. I may not get there with you. I'm not going to say that. I want to get somewhere with you, but I'm fighting because I can see us in the future. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why are you so active in this and that? Because I see us in the future. His story will not be my history. Until you know my story, you're not going to understand my glory. Those are some nice shots. I'm not the ugliest preacher in the world. I got myself down as a pastor, community activist, and if you want, you can be a business owner. You can do some things. That's the black church, the black preacher. We're not talking about those who are there trying to rob the church and the glamour of it. No. Those who are concerned about the least of God's people. There you have it. I'm through.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation, and I definitely cannot wait until we get into some question and answer with you and the other presenters. Up next, I'm sorry, Ms. Bernadine, did you?
While it's on my mind,
Yes.
and I know we're going into our next presentation, but Reverend Williams, what came to mind, if it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? And I think that is I think that could actually be an anthem for those of us who have come out of the Black church and who have lived through the struggle or experienced it or witnessed it actually in one way or another. If it were not for the Black church, indeed, where would we be, is our question this evening. So please stay with us, Reverend, as we
I'm here.
transition into a new segment. We'll come back. Thank you. We'll be back with our Q&A.
Thank
Sister, would you please? Thank you.
Up next, we are going to hear about Islam, religion or political ideology, Black Muslims in America, from Brother Zwadi Obatala Abdul Malik. Brother Zwadi holds a Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts from Penn State University. He is a tri-state Pan-Africanist community organizer with the Black Panther Party. He is a former state Senate aide and municipal administrator for Camden, New Jersey, and a former elected official and member of the City of Camden's Board of Education. He is also a lecturer of African and African American history. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Buenas noches. Assalamu alaikum. My brothers and sisters, peace be unto all of you. I give praises to the Almighty Creator and praises to my mother and my grandmother who raised me in a fine Christian spiritual home. I thank the Murdoch Center for allowing me to make this presentation. We are here tonight to hopefully present a better and clearer understanding of Islam and how it relates to humankind. What is Islam? Is it a religion or a political ideology? Islam is not a new religion, neither is it a political ideology. It's the same truth that God revealed through his prophets to every people. For 1/5 of the world's population, Islam is both a religion and a complete way of life. Those who believe in and practice Islam are called Muslims. For 1/5 of the world's population, we see that that's 1 out of 5 human beings on the planet. To be a Muslim means, and I quote, those who find peace through trusting submission to and worship of God alone. When exploring ways to check out and inspect various faiths, it's important to look at the totality of its teachings, its holy texts, its prophets, the history of its early faith community, and the interpretations of its modern scholars. And to do so, you need to understand what the basic terms of that faith actually are. Islam is one of the Abrahamic monotheistic faiths on the planet, along with Judaism and Christianity. All 3 faiths share the belief in one God. One God. Who are the Muslims. Over 5 billion people inhabit this planet. 1 billion people from a vast range of nationality, races, and cultures across the globe, from southern Philippines to Nigeria, are united by their common Islamic faith. About 18% live in the Arab world. The world's largest Muslim community is in Indonesia. Substantial parts of Asia and most of Africa are Muslim, while significant minorities are to be found in the Soviet Union, China, North and South America, and Europe. What do Muslims believe? Muslims believe in one unique, incomparable God. Believe in the angels created by God, in his prophets through whom his revelations were brought to mankind, in the day of judgment, and individual responsibility for actions, in God's complete authority over human destiny, and in life after death. Muslims believe in a chain of prophets, starting with Adam and including Noah, Abraham, Ishmael, Jacob, Joseph, Job, Moses, Aaron, David, Solomon, Elias, Jonah, John the Baptist, and Jesus. May peace be unto him. But God's final message to man, a reconfirmation of the eternal message and a summing up of all that has gone before, was revealed to the prophet Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. The foundations of the Islamic community, which in Arabic is called the Ummah, the foundations are the 5 pillars of Islam, which are the framework of Muslim life. These pillars are faith, concern for the needy, self-preservation, and the pilgrimage to Mecca for those who are able. I'll try to break them down slowly enough so that you can thoroughly understand what they are. Faith. There is only one God, and there's no God worthy of worship except that God, which under Islam is called Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The declaration of faith is called the Shahada, a simple formula which all the faithful pronounce. In Arabic, the first part of the Shahada is pronounced La ilaha illa Allah, which means there is no God but God. The second part of the Shahada is pronounced Muhammadu Rasulullah. It's all in Arabic, but it means Muhammad is the messenger of God, meaning a message of guidance has come through a man like ourselves. The second pillar is prayer, which in Arabic is called Salat. Salat is the name of the obligatory prayers which are performed 5 times a day and are a direct link between the worshiper and God. Prayers are said at dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and nightfall, and thus determine the rhythm of the entire day. The third pillar is called zakat. It's the same as charity. One of the most important principles of Islam is that all things belong to God, and that wealth is therefore held by human beings in trust. The word zakat means both purification and growth. Our possessions are purified by setting aside a portion for those in need. And like the pruning of plants, this cutting back balances and encourages new growth. Each Muslim calculates his or her own zakat individually. For most purposes, this involves the payment each year of 2.5% of one's capital. Though different from the Christian aspect of tithing, which I've heard and was told, is 10%. A person who give as much, a person who has more money, a lot of money, can give as much as he or she pleases. And that's called tzedakah. And they do these things preferably in secret. A lot of Muslims don't want notoriety for what they do or what they give. So a lot of them do it in secret, and that's called tzedakah. The fourth pillar is the fast. Every year in the month of Ramadan, all Muslims fast or stop eating or don't eat. From first light in the morning until sundown. We abstain from food, drink, and sexual relations. Those who are sick, elderly, or on a journey, and women who are pregnant or nursing are permitted to break the fast. and make up an equal number of days later in the year. If they are physically unable to do this, they must feed a needy person for every day they miss. Children begin to fast and observe prayer from puberty, although many start even earlier. Although the fast is most beneficial to the health, it is regarded principally as a method of self-purification. By cutting oneself off from worldly comforts, even for a short time, a fasting person gains true sympathy from those who go hungry, as well as growth in one's spiritual life. The fifth and last pillar of Islam is the pilgrimage, or the Hajj. This is the Arabic word. The pilgrimage, or annual pilgrimage to Mecca, called the Hajj, is an obligation only for those who are physically and financially able to perform it. Nevertheless, about 2 million people go to Mecca each year from every corner of the globe, providing a unique opportunity for those of different nations to meet one another. Although Mecca is always filled with visitors, the annual Hajj begins in the 12th month of the Islamic year, which is lunar, not solar, so that the Hajj and Ramadan falls sometimes in the summer and sometimes in the winter. It also gets around to spring and fall too. I've been on the Dean since 1962, so I understand a great deal, and I've gone through a great deal of this. Pilgrims wear special clothes on the Hajj. Simple garments, mainly white linen, which are stripped away and used to wear to give distinction of class, gives away the distinction of class and culture, so that all stand in equal vigilance to God. Does Islam tolerate other religions? The answer to that question is yes. Islamic law protects the privilege of and status of minorities in the various Islamic countries. And this is why non-Muslim places of worship have flourished all over the Islamic world. Islamic law also permits non-Muslim minorities to set up their own courts, which implement family laws drawn up by the minorities themselves. Another question regarding Islam and Muslims is, what do Muslims think about Jesus? Muslims respect and revere Jesus, peace and blessing be unto him, and we await his second coming. Muslims consider Jesus, peace and blessing be unto him, one of the greatest of God's messages to mankind. A Muslim never referred to him simply as Jesus, but we always add the phrase, upon him be peace, because he was a very peaceful man. Besides Christianity, Islam is the only religion on earth that accepts the miraculous birth of Jesus, peace and blessing be unto him. Jesus is mentioned 25 times in the Holy Quran, which I hold here. And Mother Mary, the Quran confirms Jesus' virgin birth. And there's a chapter in the Holy Quran, chapter 19, for those who want to get specific with it, which is entitled Mary. An Islamic word, Maryam, Maryam. And Mary is considered the purest woman in all creation. Jesus, peace and blessing be unto him, was born miraculously through the same power which brought Adam, unto him be peace, which brought Adam into being without a father. Neither Muhammad, peace and blessing be unto him, nor Jesus, unto him be peace, came to change the basic doctrine of the belief of one God, which was brought by earlier prophets. But they came to confirm and renew it. In regard to Black or African American Muslims in America, there are, as in Judaism and Christianity, many diverse denominations. Some are the Sunni, the Shiites, the Ahmadiyyas, the Ibadis, and the Twelvers, just to name a few. Each adhere to the Islamic faith, but some have different approaches in defining the contents of the Quran, just as various Christian and Judaic split denominations or different denominations of those faiths have their own interpretations of the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament. For the Judaic folks, the Old Testament. For the Christians, both the Old and the New. There are approximately 1 million Americans who believe and practice the Islamic faith, race excluded, because they're from all over the globe and migrated to this country. There are no cults. It is the faith and the belief of the one God. All Islamic African Americans are not members of the Nation of Islam. There are a number of Muslims who are involved in America and world politics and may possess political ideologies, but they separate politics from the religious aspects of Islam. In closing, I must add I was raised in Savannah, Georgia. I'm quite aware of Bryan Street Baptist Church. It's set in the federal public housing project I lived in for 10 years called Yamacraw Village. I was baptized at the age of 11 at St. John's Baptist Church in East Savannah, near East Side School Elementary. I went to West Side Elementary. I went to St. Benedict the Moore Catholic School. I went to Kyler Junior High School. I went to Alfred E. Beach to 10th grade and moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1957 at the age of 15. I'm from 1942 when I was born. We are the hopes and dreams of the enslaved. I was taught that education is very important. I've attended 5 universities, including law school. And in the projects, my mom told me, we live in the projects, we're not of the projects. Go to school, which I did. And I graduated at the age of 17. I came upon Islam in Philadelphia when I met one of my great teachers by the name of Minister Al-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. Some people call him Malcolm X. That drew me into learning and understanding about the one creative source that causes us all to be, regardless of our religious persuasion. There's only one creator. Call him any name you want, Jehovah, Yahweh, Oshun, Obatala. Okay? You can call him like the Asantes in Ghana. They call God Inyame. The Yorubas call God Olodumare. There are many names for the creative source that causes us all to be. Our religious philosophies are our personal connection to the creative source. But we don't have to be anti-Christian, anti-Muslim, anti-Buddhist, anti-Seventh-day Adventist, or whatever. I have relatives in every religion you can name, including Buddhism, Shintoism, Zoroastrianism, Mithraism. There's all various religions, and I'm a Bible scholar and a religious scholar. I've studied many of them. We as a people must trust in the one creative source, however direction we come with it, that one creative source that brought us here. And my grandparents, my mother, and I know my mother's Jesus, I know my grandparents' Jesus, believe me. Again, I was baptized in the Baptist Church, St. John's, right there in Savannah, Georgia. And I'm proud of that. Reverend E.O.S. Cleveland, singing pastor as well. So rather than continue on with my verbosity and all my noise and all my talking, because I can talk for hours. Like I said, I went to law school. They taught us to talk forever if necessary. I will now say thank you again to everyone. And please continue to love my niece, who I really call my daughter. My sister gave birth to her, but she's my daughter, Dr. Tracy Antoinette Moore. So, everyone, thank you very much for your listening to this old fool, and may God continue to bless you.
Amen. Thank you so much for that.
Amen. Amen.
We are going to launch into our question and answer. And for the sake of time and understanding that, Reverend Williams, you have another meeting to get to, we're going to start our questions with you this evening. First up, the question is, what has historically led to the Black Church's leading role in the liberation of Black people? Or in other words, why has the Black Church been so inextricably linked to Black liberation?
Please,
And you're on mute right now.
I'm used to Zoom. I'm finding everything. It's as I stated, because of us knowing each other intimately. And it's a level of trust. It's a level of trust. Even now, when pastors or whatever we come up, people trust us. And when you trust a person, when that trust level has been betrayed, then you're in trouble. But we could identify with each other, and so it was so important. And so to have us to be liberated, we had to cooperate with each other. That's why I mentioned that all the civil rights movement did was brought about organization, but we were trusting each other, and we were moving forward. We were constantly moving forward.
There was an audience question about the separation of church and state. And so the question is there a separation of church and state when it comes to Black community organizing and social movements? If so, where is it? And if not, why not?
It's by design. It's by design. That's why I told you when the 501c3 came in. That's why they brought it in there, to divide us. Black folk went to running the 501c3 because the government is going to give us some money. They brought that up. Now we find ourselves that trying to work around these things. And here's a good. I'm glad you brought that up, because here's a real situation right here in Savannah now. We're trying to link churches in this movement to get one of the candidates elected. And now we're dependent on another group to give us the documents or the flyers and all this kind of stuff we need to do the campaign to get around our 501c3. But you know what I do? I say what I'm going to say, and then I give the benediction, and I get to the mic, go back to the mic, and I say, this is Clarence Williams, the citizen, church over. They ain't touching me yet. The other way around it. I church over, I can say whatever I want to say when church over. See, you can't be scared in this thing. All right. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you. Thank you. And final question for you this evening. You spoke a great deal about the power of hope, and speaking power through redefining Black people not as slaves, not as inferior, not as niggers, but as children of God. And so much of this power and identity and unity seems to come from this idea of Black community development and unity. So do you agree that there is a responsibility within the Black community and the Black church to organize, come together as community, and ensure that spiritual and faith-based unity exists in social movements?
Yeah, I do. I do. Like our brothers stated, and we're doing it here in Savannah, and in certain areas in Georgia. Georgia is trying to move forward. In some reason, I know y'all kind of behind this time there in Arizona. Are y'all in Arizona? Mm-hmm. Everybody's in Arizona. I'm gonna pray for y'all tonight. Y'all, I'm gonna lift y'all in prayer. Y'all want to send me y'all social security number so I can make sure I'm praying for the right one? Cause y'all out there, y'all out there, and it's just so scary. There is a responsibility, and I think our brother said it better. And we're doing it in Savannah. We've torn down all of those barriers that we once had. And this ecumenical movement, our interfaith movement now, we find that we have more in common. We can do more together when we're organized. When I didn't want the white press into our meeting, you know what I went? I went to the Nation of Islam and told Naeem, I said, look here, I need some brothers just to stand out there. And they did. That's why they were scared to come in. They said that, then they put the word "I barred them out." Why you want to come into a black meeting anyhow? That's like asking me to come in. I'm a news reporter. I want to go into the Klan meeting. The devil is a lie. I ain't stupid. Anyway, I didn't mean to go there, but I was born in Savannah, and my people out of Yamacraw, and I used to play for St. John Baptist Church. That's a Savannah thing. Y'all don't know. Come on, give me one more good one. Y'all didn't hit me with something. Give me something where I can raise hell about. Something I can cuss on. Give me something that's gonna make me say something. Give me something.
Preacher.
I don't care. Give me something.
I know you do. I know, and that is the beautiful thing about being from the South. There's this boldness that really, and I know my brother Abdul Malik can identify with this, that we from the South, you would think that we would be afraid to speak up and to march and to speak out and to call out injustice, but there's this defiance that seems to be within us, because what nerve for you to call my brothers from the Nation of Islam to come to the Christian church and guard the gates.
And they came too.
White press out. And I know they did. I don't know. Maybe you'd want to end by speaking to that boldness that was born out of the South, that fueled these movements. Dr. King, the boldness, all of them, all of the greats, John Lewis. There's just this boldness that we seem to be endowed with. So maybe you'd want to speak to where does that power come from?
I'm going to close on that one, because what happened to us here in the South, we had the NAACP. They had youth councils. So they groomed us to do what we are doing. If we didn't have the NAACP, you had the Masons, who had some youth group. Every black entity had a youth group. And so you were introduced to the struggle. And so you understood the struggle. Now here's what's happening. My oldest daughter is 39. Do you not know I have to still call them and remind them to vote? When we got out of high school, they registered us at our graduation. So, but now the community now, there's no fight in this generation, because they think they have arrived. They think because folk they're just playing with them, and now they've seen that they pull off, and they've shown themselves. Now they want to learn how to fight. Now they want to fight. They realize these last 4 years showed us that the struggle ain't over. But our era, I was almost I was feeling bad about it. I was talking to a couple of guys, political science majors that went to Savannah State with me. I said, did we drop the ball? Because our children ain't got none of what we have. Did we drop the ball? But these last 4 years shown us, and it's shown them too. Now they see, now they want to know. So that's the difference. The fight was in us because our parents made sure that we understood the struggle and what it was all about, and that we did not arrive. And we didn't play with folk like that. They'll come in and what's the word I want to use? Intrigue our young people, make them think that they one of them. You ain't one of them. You're going to never be equal to them. And that's how, what gets me, our pastor in Claxton, Georgia. Do you know that poor white trailer trash thought they were better than Negroes and living in the trailer? Thought they were better than us. I went over there to the trailer and showed them that they take advantage of them, and we joined together. We organized. Poor people got together and turned a little town down, upside down. When we see what we have in common and bring us together, to oppress people, when we come together, we'll be a mighty force. That's it. Now, y'all, I got to go in another room. I've enjoyed this. Brother McAllister. Oh, bet you go with the terror. I wish we had time, brother, but we'll talk.
Yeah.
Y'all have a great one. I'm signing off. Y'all take care of my friend Bernie out there. And make sure that she stays holy. Keep her in prayer. And I will keep you all. Bye.
Oh God. This has been a wonderful night for me. I have to say, because for viewers, to give them some foundation to this. Brother Williams is very much a part of my family's family. My mother taught him in fourth grade, and
Wow.
and she passed away in her 70s, and he was still her favorite student. And so it was wonderful to have that relationship. So he really is like my brother and a very dear friend.
Mhm.
And so tonight was very special, and to even have brother Abdul Malik with us. Savannah is representing, not to outnumber my Baba and my brother and my baby queen here tonight, but this is truly a Savannah night.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting a question before we get, and we are going. We're still pretty good, but we know we're going to go a little over. But I'm sorry that. Reverend Williams had to leave us early. I was getting ready to pull him in. It doesn't take much to pull him in to singing some of these old spirituals, but we have a question about the connection of gospel music to the struggle, to the protest, and if anyone knows just a little, if you're not Black, I'm sure our European American brothers and sisters know about music is a big part of the Black culture. And it all of us, even in listening to Brother Abdul Malik, he is on his dean, but he gave his testimony of his life starting out in the church. And I think Baba here and baby queen, my baby queen, we all can attest to our early foundations, no matter what path we're on spiritually now. We all started in the church. And Baba, you're from South Carolina, so you know about those old spirituals, Wade in the Water, an old spiritual that actually took the slaves up from the South when they were making their escape and on the Underground Railroad, that Wade in the Water, to passing and walking through those rivers, right, to freedom. It touched my body. My body was cold, but it warmed my soul. Wade in the Water, children. And that was one of those songs that we would sing at a baptism. And me coming from Sapelo Island, modern churches had the baptismal pools inside the church in the sanctuary. On Sapelo, we still were baptized in the river. We called it the river. It was mentioned, "We Shall Overcome." One of the great protest songs, well known to everyone. Amazing Grace, although it's very controversial because it actually was written by a slave owner. and when you get deeper into some of those verses, and maybe we can come back and do a special just on gospel music. But that it's still very much Amazing Grace, a song that's deeply rooted in the Black Christian church. So it is those songs that carried us through the Underground Railroad. They were used to give directions, to keep on to the north, to keep following that northern star. The songs that we used to just simply cry out to God in seeking help and in seeking guidance. I go to the garden of prayer. Was one, and we mostly sang that one. You remember that one, Brother Abdul Malik? That was on Communion Sunday. So maybe we can get Reverend Williams back at the piano, and we can go through some of those old gospel songs that very much, it empowered us, it made us feel better, it made us cry, but out of those tears we found strength. So I hope that I've answered just a little bit, or given just a little glimpse into how important gospel music, the Negro spirituals, because they are two different things, or types of music, how they found their way. It's at the foundation of the Black church.
Well, you know, sound is the foundation, right? We were all called into being, right?
Absolutely.
You know, according to the different traditions that that we emerge from sound, and so prayer is important. In fact, it's hard for us to distinguish the difference between spirituals and prayer, right? It's essentially the same process of surviving, right? This again, this turmoil that we live in, right? That what did Malcolm call it? The American dream is for us the nightmare, right? And again, there's always that contradiction, that tension, right? King had a dream, but he realized, are we integrating into a sinking ship? Are we, in the sense that some of the failures of our movement, that we became members of the society, which is part of what's oppressing the rest of the planet, right? So we can be, we can have Black presidents and Black corporate leaders and Black lawyers, and still we have, brown, boys and girls starving throughout the planet. So how do we come to terms with that?
Yeah. The struggle is real and the struggle continues.
Absolutely.
Baby Queen, can you take us into some questions with our other host or panelists? Pardon me.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to go back to Brother Abdul Malik with some questions. One of the first questions that came up for you was, we had an audience question on the connection between the Black Panthers and Muslims. Can you speak to that?
Wow, great question.
The Black Panther Party was involved with many different Black organizations, including churches. Matter of fact, the Black Panther Party started the first breakfast for children before they went to school. And the country has absorbed that now, and it's going on all over the country. But the party started. The party was not against any particular religion. There were Muslims in the party. There were Christians in the party. Again, there were Buddhists in the party. There were all kind of people in the party. Our objective was to watch those who were supposed to be policing our community and to improve our community. I was involved as an organizer to try to help the community. That's I'm a humanitarian. That's my thing. I like to help folks and show them that we can, because I was taught we can. And the party did a lot of great things for our community, but the government, through its special agents and agent provocateurs, slowly destroyed that organization, which they have done to every black organization. The NAACP was started by Europeans, okay, along with a few black folks. And they had agent provocateurs in that organization. RAM had agent provocateurs. All the various black organizations going to have someone look like us working for them.
I think that leads perfectly into the next question that came up for you, which was, why do you think there has been that historical sense of fear of Black Muslims? Is it a misinterpretation of beliefs? Is there a connection between the criminalized image of Black people in general, or is it something deeper or something more?
Well, one of the problems is education. Majority of us are educated in a Europeanized system, lacking knowledge of self and our capabilities. Approximately 1995, I protested at the Board of Education meeting about the lack of African history in our school system. I did research around the country and found that there's only one school district in the nation at that time that required students before they graduate to take a Black history course. That was in California. So I got together some great Black minds, worked with them, people like Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakinen, Dr. George Simmons, Dr. Malefi Asante, he's from Georgia and is a personal friend of mine as well. We wrote an Afrocentric curriculum and presented it to the Camden Board of Education. Well, because of the political strength that the Eurocentric folks had, a predominantly Black and Latino Board of Education would not institute it. 1998, I got elected to that Board of Education, and I insisted on it again. I brought in those same people back, revised it, updated, and presented it to them again. As long as I sat on the board, it was implemented. But then, being the person that I am, I'm involved in a lot of different humanitarian efforts around the country. So I didn't stay on the board a lot of years, too many years, because I had too many things to do. Once I left, it's not implemented anymore. But I'm still going to work towards that. I'm still encouraging that to all our people. Insist on knowing self and the history and the great heritage we have, starting from the motherland, and never forget the Black Holocaust. The killing of Black men and women in this country, to me, is a Black Holocaust. It's been going on for over 500 years in this country. And on another aspect of togetherness, I served on the planning committee for the Million Man March. And Mr. Farrakhan asked me to be involved in southern New Jersey, from Trenton, the whole half of New Jersey. I was chairman of the Camden, South Jersey Organizing Committee. We took 44 busloads of men with us to the Million Man March. And we made a pledge to go back to our communities and work to improve them. And I'm still working. And that was 25 years ago. And we will continue to do that. And when Reverend Williams spoke about the brothers from the nation giving him security. It happens all over the country. We don't hate Christians. We are Christians ourselves. And we work with Christians. Mr. Farrakhan make many speeches in Christian churches all over the country. We're the same people, just different antagonizers and colonizers of our minds. So I'll shut up right there because I can talk all year on that topic.
You know, I could listen to you all night. I do have one more question for you, and it's what is the role of Islam in Black community action? And I ask that because I think for so many, the knowledge of that connection is limited to Malcolm X and his linking of Black spirituality and Black empowerment. But what is, for those who don't know, the broader connection that we should be aware of between Black Muslims, Black community development, Black community action, and Black empowerment?
Well, the nation is Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and currently under the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have always encouraged businesses, encourage their members to open business. I know many of them, and I'm very close to the head minister here in Philadelphia, who's also the president of Philadelphia's NAACP. We have a great connection with our people. Like I said before, we're all the same. It's just different philosophies that we adhere to. But Islam, the churches, the mosques, the temples, we must all come together, work together, because we are not discriminated against. We are not shot, killed, and hung and lynched because of our religious beliefs. We are done so because we're Black. That's the main reason why those things happen to us. I've seen very few Caucasian individuals shot by police in a car stop or whatever, or making a little racket noise. But it happened to us disproportionately to the population that we exist. We were 12, 13% of the population in this country. But 50 to 80% of the people get killed by policemen are Black or Latino. So we must take wind to that and understand that and work to prevent those things. And in Philadelphia, they have just passed a bill in the past election to bring about an organization that observes and critiques police and police actions and possibly gear up and implement some changes. Police reform, which we are also for. Because nowadays, the police generally investigate the police, and they're not going to break that thin blue line. There have some African-American policemen who will do exactly what the thin blue line says. I know some personally, and I'm in their case all the time about this. You got to be man one day. You got to grow a spine one day. My father, my uncles and aunts and grandparents, they taught me to stand up, speak up, and be heard. Silent lips and closed mouths get no feed. I'm let me shut up from that.
Thank you so much. Mr. McAllister, I want to go back to an interesting parallel that you made early in your presentation between the image of the lynching of Black people and the image of Jesus on the cross. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that parallel and just the problem of some of these symbolic images and how they link to the restoration that we see in Black spirituality.
Well, I mean, it's in terms of the symbols. I mean, I mean, isn't there an irony when you think about it of white Christianity? You know, or here you have people that they've accepted Jesus Christ as their own personal savior, right? And this is an individual that was executed by the state, right? That, and you know, these same people will crucify Black Christians.
That's right. That's right.
Hang them on a tree, just as the quote here from Acts. They hung him on a tree. I mean that's an amazing parallel, right? And it is such a contradiction. But again, if you think about the body of Christ, even that idea of the body of Christ and this religion, that you have these images of a white Jesus that are based on images of Zeus, also based on I believe this guy Cesare Borgia. This guy was actually a pedophile. Leonardo da Vinci painted the picture of this man, and that's pretty much the standard Jesus image that we see.
That's right.
This Borgia guy. And if you do any research, if you look at early Christian art, now I'm not talking about going into Black bookstores and seeing images of what we've painted of ourselves. You have in the Roman catacombs dark images of Jesus with the nappy hair. I'm talking nappy hair and black. Okay. Now those aren't the only images that you see here. You That's will right. also see some more Zeus-looking characters, with the beards. But the earliest ones are these dark images. So there's a historical basis, of replacing Cesare Borgia, with a more Ethiopian type-looking Jesus, which is biblical. Very biblical.
Can I speak on that?
Sure.
Absolutely.
In the scriptures, in the Bible, per se, Revelation 1:14 describes Jesus as having hair of lamb's wool, skin of olive like burnt in an oven. Jesus could not have been a Caucasian. Even in Europe, there are churches and chapels. There's one called Our Lady of Czestochowa in Poland, Black Madonna. The original Madonna, Mary, was black, just like you. But the Romanizers back in Rome went to Ethiopia and stole the Church of North Africa, took it into Rome, Romanized it, whitenized it, and spread it all throughout Europe, all the European countries, until they got to England. England said, no, we're not going to handle that. We'll start our own church, the Anglican Church. And they've had a war with the Irish in Ireland for years.
Yeah.
Because most of the Irish are Catholic. Most of Ireland is Catholic. But the Anglican Church has a foothold in Ireland, and they're not going to ever leave, because the British controls Ireland, Scotland, and all the various other isles. Our people don't really know the history of the church or history of ourselves. When I was a member of the Baptist Church, I was never given Baptist Church history. I know it now because I've studied all the various religions. I got grandchildren who are Mormons, so I studied that too. Like I say, relative Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Catholic, got all kinds of religion in our family. But there's only one God, and that's why I keep emphasizing to everybody. Call him whatever name you please. In South Africa, they call the creator Unkulunkulu, the Zulus. But our people rarely study and learn about our history, our heritage, our motherland. Because Africa, to me, is my motherland. That's what I call it. If you ask my nationality, I say African born in America. That's my nationality. I'm not going to be that boy, that uncle, that coon, that nigger that the Europeans manufactured. I'm an African and proud of it.
Amen.
I'd like to make one more point about this idea of a Black Jesus. Now, so I've mentioned the whole historical piece, right, with the artwork. But for me, that is not as relevant as the idea of really aligning yourself with the oppressed, right? And the oppressed in the world at this point in our history are dark-skinned people.
People of color, yes.
Right? And so if you really want to be with Jesus, you know, you have to sympathize that. You have to be on the side of that innocent victim of oppression, right?
Which our people in this country has been there for over 500 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But definitely.
I'm really glad that you made that point because it actually answered the next question I was going to ask you, so I can skip right over that one.
Okay.
But it was just going back to that important message of God is with the oppressed. So thank you for speaking on that again. The last question then is just going back to the point you made about unmerited suffering, and the idea of seeking to transform suffering into a creative force. You spoke earlier about the spiritual act of transforming tragedy into redemption. And so I think it's a powerful closing question to just ask, how do we apply faith and Black spirituality to modern social movements and modern organizing and acting to transform the unmerited suffering of people of color and of Black people into a redemptive force for change?
Great question. I don't have a good answer for it, but this is what I'm going to give you. So I myself, I am a member of the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
So there's the Christian faith, there's the Islamic faith, right? Jewish faith. Now you notice I'm not saying religion, right?
Faith, yes, sir.
So the idea of faith is that you have to deal with these contradictions. You have to deal with this mysticism, right? God is unknowable, but yet we are in the image of God.
So say the scriptures, were written by man.
Right.
There-
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's on faith, right? I mean, there's no evidence. There's no evidence that we will ever be out of this.
Correct. I agree.
That
But
the struggle will end at some point. And you know, our ancestors, you know, in this most hopeless situation, they worshipped
the struggle continues.
It's Jesus who was a victim of oppression, and that was hope.
The struggle continues continually all my 79 years. And I'm trying to
say that again.
I said the struggle continues, and it has continued way before me and all my 79 years. And my intentions are to try to reach Methuselah's age, 969 years. I'm trying for 970. I want to be here and continue struggling to help my people understand and realize the decadent, capitalistic, racist system we live in.
That's Savannah. That's Savannah Southern boldness. Tonight has truly been a real blessing. If may I take us to closing,
Absolutely.
Madam Baby Queen.
Yes.
You know, we talked about this evening Black spirituality, organizing by faith, and all throughout our story, you can see that we have always taken a tragic situation and turned it into something redemptive.
Yes, ma'am.
They have tried to kill us. They're wondering how we are still here.
That's right.
And whatever, however, and I mentioned it before we went live, however we choose to worship and acknowledge that higher power that we may call Obatala, Allah,
Yes,
God, Isa,
yes, ma'am.
Yeshua, Jesus, the Son of God.
Yes, ma'am.
It is in our power, it is in our spirit, in our Blackness, that we have been able to call on however we call on God. And sometimes we may just say, And when Black folk just say, we can shake up a room.
Yes, ma'am.
Or we can quiet a room.
Yes, ma'am.
Ain't nobody got that power except for us. And so for us to be able to be burnt, tarred and feathered, blown up in churches, lynched, hung from trees, and to still be here and to be able to look our European brothers and sisters in the eye and say, we still love you. And we're still trying to make this thing work. But at the same time, we're waiting on you to get it right because we didn't do anything wrong.
That's correct.
It was El Haji Malik Shabazz who said we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. And so we're here.
Yes.
We are yet still overcoming. And so as we close tonight, I got a request to sing a song, but I'm going to ask that we all close with We Shall Overcome. Yes. And I'll start us off, and I'm going to ask all of you to help me carry it.
Come on, you sing.
We got some more that want to come in and join us.
Yes, yes.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I to we shall And with that, we say thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to our beautiful panelists. We are going to come back with a part 2 on this. But until then, go in grace.
Thank you very much. And any topic I'm a privy to, I'll be willing to again participate.
Wassalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.